All right, guys. So far we've had a non-persistent data source configured, and so it's storing everything in RAM, and that's not really useful at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect our API to a MongoDB instance using the MongoDB connector. So we have to do a few things first. First thing you're going to have to do is install MongoDB. So if I search MongoDB Windows, we should get their website here. I'm either having deja vu or I've already discussed MongoDB with you guys. So yeah. Uh, let's scroll down a little bit. Yeah, because I remember reading the error that it's not supported with Windows Subsystem for Linux, which is not true. I've installed MongoDB. I've been using it. It's fine. However, you can download an installer here, and I'm going to copy this link for you guys. And we'll have it here with the video as well. Now, the process is simple. I'm not going to go through this myself as I've already got MongoDB installed in the Windows Subsystem for Linux method, and I don't know if this would conflict at all, and I just kind of don't want to take the chance. But it's like any other installer. You click download, you're going to open it up, you're going to run it and hit next, 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 and it should install. Now, once it does, you can right-click on your taskbar if you're using Windows 10. If you're still on like Windows 7 or something, I'm not sure if it's similar, but you can always access the task manager by hitting Control-Alt-Delete. And then if you're on Windows 10, you'll probably see this. It'll be like, okay, really small version of the window. You can click more details, and you get all these tabs across the top. So go over to Services, and now here's where you're going to find MongoDB if you install it using the Windows installer. So you can navigate, you can sort by title, and you're going to scroll down to Mongo. You're going to find MongoDB down around the M's. You're going to right click on it and you can start or stop the service, and you can also restart it. And so that's how you're going to interact with MongoDB on Windows. Now, if you're like me and you're using the Windows Subsystem for Linux, you're going to Control C out of here, and then you're going to run sudo apt-get install MongoDB and hit enter. Now I've already got this installed, so I'm just going to Control C out of here. And as far as running and stopping and restarting the service on the Windows Subsystem for Linux or on real Linux, you're gonna, well, if you're on real Linux, you're probably gonna use system control, and so the command for that is going to be sudo system control start MongoDB. Now, in the Windows Subsystem for Linux, we don't have system control, so we're going to run sudo service MongoDB start, and put in my password, and it'll say starting database MongoDB, and it should be good to go. If you're not able to get this working, there are a few problems that I've noticed. Although they were like a long time ago, I think this time it went really, really smooth installing it this way. Number of years ago, wow, 4 years ago at this point, I was working on a project called uSport. and they were using MongoDB. And this is actually story time. This was my first time using MongoDB, and they were building an application using Meteor and React. Well, actually, at first it was Blaze for the templating engine. If you know anything about Meteor, they used to offer anyway a built-in template system called Blaze. And I came into the project about midway through, and we had decided to do a complete rewrite of the application in React. It was a lot of converting Blaze templates into React components, and that was also my first time working with React, and that was in 2015. That's been a long time. Anyway, the problem that I encountered was I was using Ubuntu at the time, and when I installed MongoDB, it wouldn't actually run because it was looking for a data directory at the root of the hard drive, which didn't exist. So it was looking for this route, data DB, and it didn't exist. So I had to manually create it. You may have to manually create that. And DB is a directory, by the way. So data/DB. And then I believe you may need to take ownership of it. If you have any problems, let me know, though. We'll try and get you set up with this. Now, the second thing that we're going to need when working with MongoDB is a way to visualize the data. And by that, I just mean to, be able to see it and interact with it. And so what we're going to be using for that is Robo. It used to be called Robo Mongo. Now it's called Robo 3T. So if you go to robomongo.org, I'll also put that. Let me copy this over here. You're going to see two sections. You're going to see Studio 3T and then Robo 3T. And you're going to click Download Robo 3T. And then click again, download Robo 3T, and it should take you to the download page. If you've got JavaScript enabled, I don't. There we go. So click it, and then you're going to get a pop-up installer for 64-bit, 32-bit, and you can also get a Mac and a Linux version here. So just download the installer, hit next, next, next. It's really simple. You shouldn't have a problem with it. If you do, let me know. So, with that said and done, now that we've got MongoDB actually running as a service, I'm going to open up Robo 3T. And so you'll see this here. I'm going to close that so I can actually move the window here into view. Let me see if I can zoom this. View, options, window. Oh, I can't. All right, I'll have to zoom this in. Yeah, okay. All right, so unfortunately we can't zoom this window. That sucks. What we're going to do, when you open up Robo 3T, you're going to have the Connect dialog open. If at any time you don't, you can go into the File menu and access Connect right there. And now there should be a default connection here called New Connection, and it should be configured to localhost at port 27017. That's the default port for MongoDB. So if you have MongoDB running at this port, it should work relatively well. If you've customized that at all, you can click Create, and you can change the port and the address, change the authentication, SSH, and stuff like that. Now, we're not going to talk about it right now because we're working on localhost. We will talk about authentication for accessing MongoDB in a later video, like when we talk about deployment and stuff like that, because it can be. I remember a few years ago there were a bunch of hacks that people found unsecured MongoDB instances and they destroyed the entire database. Well, they removed the entire, like, everything from MongoDB, and they leave a message in it saying send Bitcoin to this address if you want to see your data again. So I mean, it's, by default MongoDB is not secure, and we are going to secure it in a later video. For right now, just click new connection, whatever it's called here, localhost at the default port, and click connect. Now, you won't see anything here yet. You shouldn't. I have other databases here. And we're not going to manually create a database. That's what our API is going to do for us as it needs it. If you come from a PHP or MySQL background, you know that when you are building an application, you actually need to go and build, you go into MySQL, like phpMyAdmin or something, and you would create the database at the very least. And your code could determine if it has necessary tables or not, and it could create them on the fly, but you at the very least need to create a database. We don't have to do any of that in MongoDB. So RoboMongo is going to come into play a bit later. What we need to do at this point, so just to recap, we now have MongoDB set up, we have RoboMongo, and we are good to go. If you guys are not at that point yet, pause the video, come back to it. So assuming that we're all good to go, what we need to do is install a MongoDB connector to Loopback. So if I bring up my terminal, so at this point I'm in my applications directory, and we're going to run npm install --save, and then the package that we're going to install is called Loopback Connector MongoDB, and then hit enter. And it should have added it successfully. Now what we need to do is we need to configure the data source. So up to this point, when we've created a model, so let's go ahead and look at the profile.json, or actually it would be modelconfig.json. What we can see is that all of our models are using the data source DB. And on the left-hand side, if we go to datasources.json, we'll see that DB is created here with the name DB. And so the connector here is memory. What we need to do is we're going to add fields here to configure this existing data source to use MongoDB. And so the first thing we're going to set is connector. We're going to get rid of where it says memory, and we're going to say MongoDB. There we go. Now, a few necessary fields that we have to have, absolutely have to, for this to work. We need to specify the host, the port, the database, and then also username and password. We'll come back to the username and password because we're not authenticating to the database just yet. So once we actually talk about deployment and security, we'll get back to this. For right now, go ahead and add a field called host, and then the value for this is just going to be localhost. Under that, add a field called port, and this is going to be an integer, and it's going to be the actual port number, 27017. There we go. Oh, my keyboard does not like me today. All right. Now we're going to add another field called database. And now this is going to be, when I bring up RoboMongo, we see the list here on the left-hand side. It's going to be listed there. So whatever we want to call it at that point. For right now, let's just name it my website. We're going to have to give it a user field. Let's leave that blank. We're not authenticating. And password. It's also going to be blank. Now, when you save this and jump back in here into terminal, we're going to run npm start. And what we will see when we create our user is now it's going to be created in the MongoDB instance. So if I bring up RoboMongo and refresh, we'll see that nothing has happened yet. And as soon as we start writing the data into the database, well, it's going to get created. So let's refresh our Explorer page. Let's go into user and let's go to post. So as always, I'm going to type in email nick at, should make it so I remember it, .com, and then password is going to be test, the most secure password in the world, because nobody would assume that I would use something as basic as that, and then try it out. Now we see we've got a new ID. So previously, when we were working with memory, the types of IDs we were getting were integers, and they would auto increment. So they would go 1, 2, 3, you know. And now we're getting this new ID, which shows us that yes, it actually has worked, and we are getting a Mongo collection. And we click here and then double click into collections. We will see all of the collections. So if I go into user, now we can see we have a user object, and this is what it looks like on the back end. And our profile as well, we have one of those. Now at this point, the custom access token is not instantiated because we haven't had a need to use it yet. So when I go to log in, I'm going to add email. It's going to be nick@nick.com, and then password is going to be test, and I actually use this password for everything. And then click try it out, and we're getting this. And if we open up Mongo and right click here and click refresh, we'll see custom access token has been instantiated, and it's added a token. Now, this also confirms that our custom access token subclassing has in fact worked when we're still getting, like, you can't access the custom tokens via the API, and so that's why it would give an error message regarding authentication, even though we are authenticated. And we can see that user ID is being set as an object ID. If we come into profile, we'll see the same thing. So we are specifying that it is text. And Loopback has a way of identifying what should be an object ID based on the format of it. And so it will set the type as object ID. We can also see that the dates here, we're going to get more into the different types and whatnot. But for right now, this information will persist across reboots. So there's nothing really more that we have to do. So in the next video, let's start adding, I guess. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring this back around to our React application. This API, the database, is going to be used for post storing. So a while back I had discussed adding blogging capabilities to our React application. this is the API that's going to make that possible. So in addition to profile, user, and custom access tokens, we're going to need the capability of adding posts and files. So uploading images and whatnot to use as the, I guess, like if you have ever worked with WordPress, you're familiar with how each post can have a featured image. We're going to do something similar with that, and we're going to use this database and API to make that happen. So in the next video, we're going to create our post and maybe even file upload capabilities.